Chest up, shoulders back. This is Revival Fitness, and there are all kinds of videos about what you're doing wrong in the gym, not optimal, killing your gains, but that's all in the context of the weight room. You can argue that what you do outside of the gym impacts your gains just as much, or really perhaps even more, than what you do inside of it. So we commonly hear, when it comes to recovery, it's always two big things. One, get enough sleep. Two, get enough protein. You get those two things and you're supposed to just grow like a weed. And those are very important, but they do not tell nearly the entire story. And this is basic stuff.
Basic.
You are not growing when you are training in the gym. It may look like you are because you get the pump and you can flex in the mirror and make crazy faces as you push yourself, but the actual muscle growth and adaptation processes occur. You get stronger when you're outside of the gym recovering. And the first area we're going to cover here is muscle soreness and tightness. Now, typical muscle soreness after a workout is seen as a badge of honor. You can't walk after leg day, bro. That soreness, tangibly speaking, really does not mean anything for muscle growth. You may see people in comment sections or in person talk about DOMS. What they're referring to is the acronym Delayed Onset Muscle Soreness. It's pretty much just a fancy way to say that your muscles are sore. Delayed onset meaning it happens after the workout, but you know how people are in the science community, they just like to add words for the sake of adding words. Now, if you're new to the gym, or if you just returned from training after an extended layoff, you can definitely expect some wicked soreness. Or if you're doing a new exercise for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, that also can happen to you. For instance, me, as you guys know, I used to be a leg day skipper. A couple years ago, I trained calves for the first time in pretty much 2 entire years. I did nothing for them at any point leading up to that. When I woke up the next morning, I could not even stand up straight. I could not walk around properly without looking like a battered old man for an entire week. Once you're accustomed to training though, overall soreness, even directly the day or two after you work a specific muscle group, should be pretty modest. If you're at the point right now where you're constantly sore in one or more muscle groups on a regular basis, especially to the point that it affects your day-to-day life, you, my friend, need to cut down on your junk volume. It's very popular to see all these new exercises that pop up on social media. You see these reels, right? Like, my back finally started growing when I did this. Add that. My biceps grew when I did this. Add that. You end up throwing in all these new exercises into your routine because it's like, oh, well, I gotta do high volume and all these things to really grow. What you're doing in a lot of cases, guys, if you train with sufficient intensity, you're just spending extra time in the gym and adding on extra fatigue onto your recovery and making yourself more sore. You're artificially limiting your own progress, even though your intentions are good. That's not how it's actually turning out. You're doing the opposite. Now that said, after a number of months of hard training, I'd say especially the more experienced you are, the farther outside of the novice phase that you are, there's a good chance that you're simply going to be beat up. And this doesn't mean that you're injured, but simply the fact that your overall body is very fatigued from lifting consistently for so long and progressing the entire time. And not only are we doing the repetitive movements inside of the gym, think of all the repetitive movements we do outside of it as well. So hunching over at the desk, guilty of that myself, I bet you are too. You're probably hunching over right now, dude. Get your chest up and your shoulders back. Slouching over while driving in the car. Carrying a bag with the same arm over and over, kind of throwing it over the same shoulder. And even if you sleep in a certain position and you're on your one shoulder, your head turns to the side, you kind of put more pressure on one side of your neck. These are things that we all do on a regular basis. They can play out in much bigger consequences with your training. This can include limited mobility in certain parts of the body, muscle imbalances, overcompensation to one side, especially the deeper into a given set that you get. And once you become aware of these problems, this is where many people will opt for a massage. I started getting massages regularly a couple of years ago. I tend to get them probably every 3 to 4 months. Sometimes I go longer than that, but I'm definitely a fan of them and the benefits they provide. Now that said, a quality deep tissue massage is definitely not cheap. And you also have to physically get to the location. On top of scheduling, it may interfere with your work or other things going on in your day. So if you're like me and want to get all the benefits of a massage, but from the comfort and convenience of home, you don't have to look any farther than the partner of today's video, the Bob and Brad D6 massage gun. The D6 Pro is one of the highest rated massage guns on the market today, and its unique design that offers what others can't is one of the biggest reasons why. Whereas other massage guns have a limited design, rendering you unable to really hit a lot of parts of your back, maybe even your lower legs as well, the D6 has a 90-degree adjustable handle, as well as the ergonomic multi-grip. You can hold it in the standard fashion, on its base, as well as in a reverse manner. The D6 is able to apply 85 pounds of stall force, making it the most powerful massage gun on the market, as well as being 20% quieter than comparable brands. With 16mm amplitude, the D6 Pro includes 7 high-quality attachments that are going to allow you to hit the largest and smallest parts of the body, as well as everything in between. My favorite combination, without question, is the small Q-tip attachment. As you can see here, I like to really dig into the sides of my neck, as well as the base of the back of my head. When doing this, it feels great after a long day of driving, looking at the phone, hunching over at the desk. It just really eases a lot of tension that is built up. The D6 has remarkable battery life, getting up to 180 minutes. Yes, that is 3 hours of continuous use, and there are 6 speeds built in for easy use, 1500 up to 2500 RPM. So if you guys are looking to give the Bob and Brad D6 Pro a try, you can get it on Amazon in the link in the pinned comment and the description box. On the Amazon checkout page under promotional codes, enter in all caps Bob and Brad D6. You're going to receive 10% off. So if you're somebody now that is looking for a better quality massage gun, if you're looking to give massages a try for the first time but are kind of skeptical about it, I cannot recommend this product enough. It has really helped out my own recovery and stress management, and it's going to help yours as well. Now the next area to cover here is rest days. The kryptonite to the hardcore gym bro who loses his self-esteem whenever he's not in the gym with a pump. And you guys know I like to rail on the 6-day-a-week PPL bras. Some of you guys train every single day, which is just patently ridiculous, but the lack of recovery is one of the core issues with it, and it's why PPL fails for so many guys. So we just talked about muscle soreness and tightness, but the muscles themselves are not all you need to think about in terms of holistic recovery. You also need to be thinking about your joints, your tendons, and your connective tissue. So even if you're not hitting the same muscle group on consecutive days, or even multiple days a week, the joints and the tendons and the connective tissue are going to be used in some form every single day that you train. But this is one of the biggest reasons why guys who switch from a typical 6-day-a-week PPL, maybe they find my channel, they switch to a 3 or 4 day split, and they end up seeing much better progress, even though they were scared to actually make the change in the first place. And this comment right here, someone left on an old video of mine, illustrates the state of the fitness industry. He asks, well, how do you hit each muscle group 2 times a week without push-pull legs? And, this might sound funny, but I think it's really sad. Because if you come from mainstream gym bro culture, or at least you start there like a lot of us did, the only 2 splits you ever hear about, the only 2 splits that exist in that culture are PPL or the bro split. And in reality, a properly programmed 3 or 4 day split is going to hit all the muscles more than once per week, while giving you the additional benefit of the increased recovery. The average person, for their goals, 4 days a week in the gym, even the more experienced you get, is really all you need. And we'll do some quick math to demonstrate this point. So if you train on a typical 6 out of 7 day PPL, 6 divided by 7 comes out to 85.7%. You can round up to 86. That means 86% of days in the year, and you might miss a little bit more due to travel or sickness, etc., but just generally speaking, you're training in the gym with weights in some form 86% of the year. Your body's subjected to that stress. Not just the muscles, as we talked about, the tendons, the joints, the connective tissue as well, even your nervous system. Compare that to a well-rounded 4 day split. That is 4 divided by 7, 57% of days you're doing the same thing. This comes out to a difference of 28.6%. And on a 4 day per week split versus 6, you get 104 extra rest days per year. 104. If you think that is not going to have a serious positive impact on your recovery and thus your overall growth, you have been brainwashed by the mainstream fitness space. By default, when one variable goes up, another must go down. So if your frequency is very high, if you're training 6 days a week, your overall volume is going to have to drop down to compensate for that. If your volume's very high, your intensity is going to have to drop down as a byproduct. There's no way to get all three of these things, guys, maximally pushed out at the same time: volume, frequency, and intensity. The only way that is possible to make this work, to be in the gym all the time, training every set to failure, and doing a lot of volume on top of that, there's a special secret sauce that might allow you to do that. Now, in addition to the split that you're doing in terms of schedule, we also need to talk about your overall exercise selection. And the biggest point here is going to come down to axial loading. So axial loading basically refers to your low back having to endure stress to stabilize your body against an external force. This is, in most cases, going to be a bar resting on your shoulders, such as a typical back squat, or something like a deadlift, where you're in a hip hinge position and your low back has to bear a lot of load as you fight against the weight. And while a lot of the core movements fit this criteria, squats, deadlifts, rows, even overhead press fit into this category, you can do more of that as a beginner simply because you're not using very much weight yet. The overall stress on your body from your workouts on your 5th month in the gym compared to your 5th year are very, very different. So let's once again return to a typical PPL and look at some of these exercises. So let's say on the push day, you do an overhead press. That can be stressful on the low back, especially the typical standing version. As you get to the last few reps and you sort of lean back more, that is going to get the low back involved. For a lot of guys too, especially if they're taller, it might be more than they would like to, even if they're wearing a belt. Then go on to the pull day. Say you do rows or deadlifts. Those are both stressful on the low back too. Depending on your circumstances, I mean, plenty of people, if they do a hard few sets of bent over rows, they could argue that's as stressful on their low back as even one top heavy set of deadlifts. In my experience, the deadlifts are more taxing on the low back, but that's kind of up to the individual. And then you go on to the leg day, and say you're supposed to do squats and or Romanian deadlifts. Also very stressful on the low back. And what a lot of guys do as well with their PPL is that they will repeat the same exact exercises 2 times a week. So even if you could be progressing on these exercises normally, your low back could be so fatigued even after just a number of months of doing this type of programming that you're going to be artificially holding yourself back. Maybe you can go from a standing row to a chest supported row. You could do something like Hatfield squats where you're holding on to handles or pegs or a bar in front of you. That takes some stress off the low back. Maybe you can prioritize machines for an extended period. Maybe even doing something like higher reps with lighter weight compared to lower reps with heavier weight. That might help depending on the exercise. It's a lot of trial and error for yourself, guys. Also depending on what type of equipment that you have in your home gym or at the gym you go to, whatever the case might be. But if you guys are looking for a full breakdown of the signs that it's time to change the exercises you're doing right now, you can check the video in the top corner. I break it all down there. Now, the next order of business is something that is talked about very commonly in the modern fitness space. Even though a lot of people spew a lot of nonsense when it comes to this, it is your diet. So the first area here is simply eating enough. Alright, now guys, I have a lot of videos here about bulking. I'm not going to go into the entire spiel. You can watch all those videos. I got probably 2 or 3 dozen of them at this point. But you can have the greatest training program on earth. You could sleep 10 hours a day. You could have nothing to do besides just go to the gym and relax all day. Even if it's like, oh, I have high protein and I have, all these so-called healthy foods, right? If you're not eating enough food in general to spur growth, you're going to really handicap yourself. And yes, for a lot of you guys, that means the scale is going to have to go up. Gonna have to gain a little bit of body fat. I know a lot of you too, if you've been very overweight or obese in the past, and you cut down a lot, you may have a mental issue with seeing the scale increase. And this is especially true if you're somebody right now who does not have a genetically big appetite and you're skinny. You're probably going to have to force feed yourself to really grow. It is what it is, guys. There's no way around it. Unless you want to just shove down junk food, and fast food, which we're going to talk about in a second. I don't recommend doing that. You're going to have to measure out your meals and track them to some degree to ensure that you're eating enough. I know it's not fun, but you didn't get into this for fun, did you? You got into it to get huge. And you're not huge, so you gotta do stuff you don't really want to do sometimes. But beyond simply eating enough, on the topic of nutrient density, this is one of the biggest reasons why CONSULTATIONS, which is what mainstream fitness professionals, even guys with like advanced degrees in this field, they just say CONSULTATIONS over and over and over, and they seem to gloss over so many of these other factors. If you want to maximize your gym results, guys, you cannot only be concerned with calories and protein, carbs, and fats. Those are macronutrients. You also need to be aware of the micronutrients in your food, and these are going to ultimately affect your hormones. So this is not going to turn into an entire dissertation about hormones, guys, but the point is, if you're eating a nutrient-dense diet, you're going to be in a much better position than somebody who is just simply eating whatever they want or just kind of shoving down the calories, bro, the old bulking mentality. Even if the calories are totally the same, even if the macros are the exact same, and person A has much more nutrients in their diet compared to person B, person A is going to recover better by default. And the vitamins I mentioned too are fat soluble, meaning you want to have sufficient fat in your diet that's going to allow you to totally absorb these. And this is one of the biggest issues with the people that really go into the anabolic diet, as I have a previous video about, and a lot of comments have been left on my channel from people that followed that. You can even find these comments on Reddit forums and other things like that too. What do they commonly do with this diet, right? They basically take anything, make it as low fat as possible, remove as many calories as possible, slap protein in it, and they're like, hey, well, it's healthy now because protein and low fat and reduced sugar. That does not mean a food is healthy. The fact of the matter is that dietary fat, especially from animal sources, is the most nutrient-dense macro that you're going to get. So focusing on quality fats is also a big area of concern here too, not just simply getting more fat for the sake of it, because in so much modern food today, it is filled up with all kinds of industrial seed oils that are very inflammatory, so no matter the exact diet that you follow, the core of it should be whole foods. If you're eating all this glorified junk food, because, oh, well, it tastes better than the boring whole food, or, you know, the excuses, I don't have time to cook X, Y, and Z, you do have time to cook, guys. I mean, I see people nowadays say stuff like, oh, well, eating out is actually cheaper than making your own food, and it's like, you have no idea how money or business works, first of all, but second of all, in certain instances, if you're really pressed for time, I get it, but guys, you need to be in control of what you make. I get a lot of young guys commenting this too. They're like, oh, well, I live with my mom, and she makes a bunch of sweets, and my family eats out all the time, so I go with that. Guys, you don't need to become like an obsessive bodybuilder carrying Tupperware everywhere you go. You do need to have a grip on what you're eating. You need to have this stuff planned out, stuff that you can consistently stick to. If you're in a situation right now where your friends and or your family are constantly eating out, eating junk food, all this other stuff, I understand this can be tough, guys, but you're going to have to remove yourself from that in some way. Even if you're at the house and you're eating your boring, healthy food and they're like, what is that? We're getting pizza or wings or something. I understand that can be difficult, guys, to kind of mentally overcome because you know they're going to give you grief for it in a lot of cases. Even some people, man, I know if you're a skinny guy and you want to eat more, your parents will always be like, are you eating again? You're eating that? You know what I mean? They'll just keep constantly just kind of poking you for trying to eat more, and it gets kind of old and tiresome. So find ways to keep yourself busy outside of the house, guys. I think that's the most tangible thing I can tell you, to not have to deal with that as much. And when it comes to stress, something that may be adding more stress to you than you may realize are the stimulants that you're taking. So as we know, pretty much every modern gym goer is a caffeine addict. I know dudes who have been lifting for 2 to 3 months that can name every single brand of pre-workout, and they still can't squat or deadlift correctly. But I was just talking to a girl at the gym the other day. It was like 10 p.m. or so, and she told me like, yeah, like I drank 2 energy drinks and took a scoop of pre-workout before I got here. I was like, when'd you get here? She was like, about 30 minutes ago. So I was like, well, when do you fall asleep? She's like, I don't. I stay up till like 4 or 5. So this is a cycle a lot of people end up getting in. Even people that take caffeine much earlier in the day. I notice a lot of people, because I have never regularly taken caffeine, guys. I think I'm gradually starting to think about changing that because some of these days I'm just very tired, but I really don't want to become dependent on caffeine. I'm sure a lot of you guys said the same thing until it happened to you. then you end up in the Starbucks line every single day of your life, like everybody else. But a lot of people seem to say that if they take caffeine after roughly 3 p.m. or so, is what I hear a lot, they will still struggle to fall asleep, even all those hours later. But you guys see now, there's always a new brand of pre-workout that's high stim, highest quality, highest grade. There's all these ingredients, all these new energy drinks that people take. There's this never-ending assumption you have to get really hyped up and crazy to go have a successful workout. That is definitely not the case. But people do all this stuff, then get to the gym. They can't even start training until 30 minutes in because they're stuck on the toilet from their explosive caffeine farts. So even if you had this amazing workout on your new stim, and you hit a PR and all this other stuff, if you only sleep 4 hours that night as opposed to if you didn't take that and had a more lackluster workout but slept for 7 or 8 hours, you're going to recover more from the underwhelming workout with the extra sleep. But when it comes to sleeping, what a lot of people do to try to get to sleep faster is take melatonin. Now, melatonin is something that I'd say most people report that it works for them. Even if it doesn't, it's extremely cheap. Like most bottles I've seen in recent years are $5 to $10. I've taken melatonin in the past. I don't anymore, but it's something that if you do struggle to sleep, maybe you are somebody that is kind of trying to wean off of caffeine and you're struggling in that regard. Maybe if you work late and you're trying to get to sleep faster, I'd say melatonin is definitely at least worth trying. I've never done NyQuil or any of these other things, so I can't really speak on them. But I'd say if you're at the point where you're taking actual like sickness medication just to get your eyes shut, you probably want to sort some things out. Something I used to do as well when it comes to sleep would be smoking cannabis. And I have to say the word cannabis because it's fancy. Now, I do think that this can definitely help you fall asleep simply because it tends to make you groggier, especially if you smoke a lot or eat a lot, and depending on the strain. This may affect your REM sleep, so even if you are very tired and you spend a lot of time in bed, you might not be in deep sleep for nearly as much time as you think, so the quality of the sleep that you're getting is not that high. And the same can be said for alcohol too. You might hear people say that they like to have a nightcap before they go to bed. They get a little drunk, kind of buzzed, then they fade off into sleep. Alcohol can prevent you from reaching full REM sleep as well as the sedative effect wears off. And alcohol in general, especially if you drink it on a consistent basis, it is going to end up dehydrating you, and it's toxic on the liver as well. I don't believe the cannabis is overall as toxic as alcohol. Now, if you're smoking it a lot too, and you're dealing with your lungs in that fashion, that's not very good either. So once again, guys, if you are using these things every now and then, or maybe just kind of using a little bit to fall asleep, I understand. But I would say generally speaking, for the best recovery possible, doing it without anything is the best way if you can manage that. And speaking of sleep, that is the final thing we're going to talk about here. So we're going to start with the sleep environment. So we know that having a consistent sleep and wake up time every day is very good for your body's overall circadian rhythm and your homeostasis. And I know this is not always possible, guys, especially if you have kids or work a lot or travel a lot. You're going to have a sleep schedule that is thrown off, I'd say pretty frequently for a lot of you, and that's why a lot of people are going to resort to the methods we just talked about to sort of try to compensate for that. But you want to get it as close as you can, and especially a lot of you guys watching this are young men and women. You're in high school or college, maybe you just graduated. Your life is not nearly that stressful yet. You can definitely get a solid sleep schedule down if you really want to. In most cases. Most of you guys in school still are like, oh, I have to stay up late to write an essay, bro. It's like, dude, I know you put that essay off, a whole 5-page essay, God forbid. You put it off until the night before, even though you got the assignment 3 months in advance. But before you go to bed, something you want to do is limit screen time, especially the brightness. So a lot of phones and devices now have options where you can dim to a certain level before you go to bed. That can adjust your eyes better to the darkness. You can dim the lights or even turn them off in a lot of areas in your house or your apartment. Turn off loud music, take off the headphones if you're working on stuff, sort of wind down your work. Try not to work like crazy all the way up until you're supposed to go to bed, so your mind is still racing. And in terms of the environment too, what you want to do is have a cool room to sleep in. Some of you may benefit from having on an air conditioner or maybe a fan. And if you're in a spot now where a certain light gets in your window, maybe from a street light outside, a reflection, etc., maybe you have a roommate who stays up on their computer and it sort of messes with your vision, I would buy eye covers or masks while you sleep. That is definitely going to help you. You want to minimize the distractions while sleeping, guys, as much as you possibly can. And one last note, if you have a roommate or neighbor who never shuts the hell up during the nighttime when you're trying to sleep, do not hesitate, confront them about it, because if you don't get on them now, it's only going to get worse and worse. I know this from experience, don't let it happen. And on that note, it is 1:15 a.m. here as I'm recording this, so I'm damaging my own recovery now. It's time for me to go to bed. So thank you guys very much for watching. Be sure to check out the Bob and Brad D6 Pro massage gun in the links down below. Use the code to get 10% off. You can get in direct contact with me via Patreon and join the Discord server for questions about your own training and eating. And I will catch you guys next time.